been years and years of talk by presidents about making our children safe again in their classrooms. This president is determined to finally get it done.
People sitting in my position did not take action. They didn't take proper action. They took no action at all. We're going to take action. We're going to do strong background checks. We're going to work on getting the age up to 21 instead of 18. We're getting rid of the bump stocks, and we're going to be focusing very strongly on mental health.
Mr. Trump held another sit-down on the subject at the White House today, this time with state and local officials from across the country. In addition to gun law reforms and mental health screenings, the president suggests arming some teachers to deter school shootings.
We have to harden our schools, not soften them up. A gun-free zone to a killer or somebody that wants to be a killer, that's like going in for the ice cream. That's like, here I am, take me. One of the fake news networks, CNN last night, was saying, I want teachers to have guns. I don't want teachers to have guns. I want certain highly adept people, people that understand weaponry, guns, if they really have that aptitude. I think a concealed permit for having teachers and letting people know that there are people in the building with guns. You won't have, in my opinion, you won't have these shootings because these people are cowards. They're not going to walk into a school if 20% of the teachers have guns.
Not everyone is on board with that idea. So a lot of progress in terms of the last 2 days, getting people together, Greg, to talk about these issues, brainstorming, coming up with some ideas. The president now has some specifics that he seems to be seizing upon.
It's interesting that most of the practical solutions are coming from reasonable people, people that know statistics, understand the weaponry, and can speak rationally. I have to say that we've gone through this a lot of these shootings in the last, especially with the 5 over the last 6 years. We have mentioned specifically these very solutions. We've talked about hardening soft targets. I remember every time there was a shooting, I would say the same thing about Fox News we're surrounded by security, and the people that talk about gun control on TV are surrounded by security. When you're on CNN or MSNBC or wherever, there are people who create a loop of fabulous armed security so they can go tell you why you shouldn't have a gun. We've talked about databases. We've talked about asylums a number of times. I guess my point is, it amazes me how narrow the media is on this topic, that they act as if they've never heard these things before, that these are all like mind-blowing. Oh my God, you mean have armed security in schools? Well, you're criminalizing the schools. It's like, no, it's like these are not new ideas. These are ideas that we have talked about, and it drives me crazy. It just shows when anchors and people get the vapors over this stuff, it shows how blind they have been to this discussion and how they've cordoned themselves off from people with actual sensible ideas. Instead of saying do something and then getting angry and emotional, these are actually practical solutions, but we have talked about these for years.
Okay, Dana, what do you make of the, I guess the last 48 hours in terms of the discussions, the people that came to speak, groups brought together, and the ideas?
Well, I think it's all been super interesting. And I was thinking about today, let's talk about the presidents, because I think the CNN town hall is just something different, and it was a different tone and tenor.
A little bit later, yeah.
So one of the things that you do at a White House, I think they still have it there, it's called the policy time with the president. This is usually something that is definitely not on camera, and it's where everybody that has a seat at the table, usually senior staff and relevant federal agencies, either the secretary or the deputy, are there, and they throw out their ideas, and the president can say yes, no, I don't like. You were actually watching that in real time today. For example, a couple of times the president jumped in and said, I don't like the active shooter drills. I don't like it. And he explained why. Because he said for children it would be traumatic, and why would we want to do this to them? It was very interesting to see that. And you also have a situation where a president in real time is talking about ideas that aren't totally fleshed out. And so when somebody says, well, but the NRA is not going to support that, it's like, oh, yeah, they will. Then the NRA says, well, no, actually, I don't support that when it comes to raising the age limit. But he's not afraid to walk over hot coals that most politicians aren't willing to do, to just say, well, I'll try that. I'm for that. Well, why don't we try that? And maybe at the end of this, we'll end up with the bump stock thing, maybe something on the state level that deals with protecting schools and hard targets. I do think that some of that has to come from a local level. You get people getting real specific real quickly. The president said, what about giving some of these teachers bonuses? If they are adept at using weapons and they could be one of these teachers, and we could give them a little bit of bonus, and it's an incentive money. Immediately, the school board person there says, yeah, could you tell us how we might actually pay for that? Because we don't have any extra money for that. And the president's like, okay, but we'll work on that later. You're actually watching policymaking in real time rather than getting it all finished and in a nice package with a bow and then presented to the American people. So it's interesting.
Okay, good.
I love the bonus idea, though. That was a great idea.
It's a businessman's idea.
Exactly.
It's an incentive
Bonuses.
that would work.
But it makes sense, right?
Not crumbs.
But you build
Not
in
crumbs,
some
yeah.
incentives. What did you think, Jesse? I mean, obviously, I know you were very moved, as we all were yesterday. And then today was, I think, a significant follow-up.
I'm kind of struck by how the Republican Party is the party of ideas. To Greg's point, you've had so many specific ideas come out from the president's mouth about solving this issue. You've had a lot of specific ideas coming from the president's mouth about solving immigration. And we saw the same kind of organic, how the sausage is made kind of meeting with the immigration thing. You're seeing it with guns now. And I'm not hearing the same sort of ideas coming from the Democratic side of the aisle. I don't even know what the Democrats want to do on guns. I know they don't like guns. I know they want to ban AR-15s, but besides that, in terms of school safety, what is the Democrats' position on school safety? I don't know what it is. Maybe Juan can enlighten me, but we've just rattled off 3 to 4 to 5, 6 really great practical ideas, and the president, to his credit, is leading his party away from the kind of strict, I'm not going to do anything on guns stance that they've had in the past. And it's a tired analogy. It's the Nixon goes to China analogy. I hate to use it, but it's so appropriate here. If anybody can do something on guns and gun safety, it's going to be President Donald J. Trump. It's not like, and the Democrats love to say this, the kindergarten teacher who's 80 years old, Miss Edelman, is going to be packing a 9mm on her waist while she teaches, 1 + 1 is 2. That's a scare tactic. He's talking about janitors or bureaucrats or administrators or teachers that are trained and have licenses, have a locked-up weapon, so when the alarm goes off, they can go do that. I don't see what the problem is with that. The Democrats seem to want to ban bad guys and good guys from having weapons. I don't understand why we would ban good guys.
Okay. All right, Juan, what did you think of the last 2 days now?
Well, I think the signal event of the last 2 days is the young people coming out, Kimberly, in the way that they have and becoming a force in the political discussion about guns in the aftermath of what took place in Parkland. And then the other side of it that's more fascinating to me, in a sad way, is the attacks on the kids that have come from the right, calling them actors and puppets.
Crisis actors.
Yeah, and absolutely belittling young people because they stand up and say, hey, this is impacting our lives, enough's enough, do something. I think it is a cry that's being heard around the country. Now, to me, when you talk about things like, oh, let's arm the schools, which is, seems to me, the #1 idea coming from President Trump, essentially, I think you're enlisting then in the NRA Army because you're saying everybody has to have guns. We're going to have guns everywhere, even around our children. And I think with the proliferation of guns in schools, I think you can anticipate there are going to be more gun incidents in schools. And to me, that's not a good idea. I think what we want to do is speak clearly. The problem is because of the NRA and its power over the politicians, you get into a situation like you had last night at the CNN event where Marco Rubio, he's saying, I am for lowering the age limit, which is what President Trump has said with regard to the guns.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
and people say, oh, no, what about
but your fixation on the NRA is your way out of a debate.
No,
we sat here and just mentioned practical things. And
there's no
practical. But the NRA. Let's focus on what we talked about.
Greg, I said I think that arming schools is essentially asking all of us to enlist in the NRA Army so we don't have to have a discussion
But speaking
about
of the
gun
NRA,
control.
if we can, Leader Wayne LaPierre offered a fierce defense of gun rights at CPAC.
If they truly cared, what they would do is they would protect them. For them, it's not a safety issue. It's a political issue. Their goal is to eliminate the Second Amendment and our firearms freedoms so they can eradicate all individual freedoms. Evil must be confronted immediately with all necessary force to protect our kids. To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun.
Okay, that was a line, Greg, that was well received by the crowd. Saying,
Yeah, it's a
put down evil, you need
well-worn
somebody.
line. We've heard this line before, but it's true. If you want an example of what he's talking about, just listen to the police chief last night, and I know we're going to talk about the CNN town hall in the B block. But government, the police, sometimes that police chief can't protect you. I mean, they went to that kid's house how many times? They had like how many, 30-some-odd instances, and they booed the NRA at that town hall. So what I learned when I listened to that police chief is that a private citizen, which is a security or trained personnel, could have stopped this because the police didn't. And that's the thing. It's like sometimes government just can't be there. And I go back to that other statistic that's been used. The duration of a gun attack is dictated by the arrival of a second gun. So if the gun's already there, do the math.
Let me just tell you
lives.
something that stood out to me watching Wayne LaPierre, who I know. I thought Wayne LaPierre at CPAC, this is going to be Wayne LaPierre being feted, endorsed, applauded. Dana Loesch was there too,
Yeah.
Kimberly. I thought this is going to be their moment because this is their crowd. At one point, Wayne LaPierre says, it's awfully quiet. Oh, I guess you should be afraid. You know what? I think there are lots of people who identify as conservatives and gun rights supporters who are uncomfortable at this moment, and I think that's great.
I think you're looking at a transition at the NRA. I think that he is the old face of the NRA, and I think the new face
Don't
is Dana
tell
Lash.
him that. He would not be happy.
But I'm just thinking that Dana Lash is I believe, is the future, which you have a young, strong woman who can articulate this idea to young people and brave enough to go in front. Like, CNN offered such a great deal to Dana Lash. Don't come and we'll make fun of you, or come and we'll make fun of you.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
Marco Rubio showed up.
I agree.
We got to talk, guys.
Juan,
That's the B block. We've said it 10 times.
I want to address something you said
Sure.
in the beginning. You said we were going to arm the schools. That's not accurate. Not every teacher gets a gun. They're not going to have, like, turrets, above the school with, like, machine guns sweeping the grounds. That's insane. And you're saying you're enlisting them in the NRA Army? That's just rhetoric, Juan. If you give one teacher, a trained teacher, a weapon to then use to neutralize a school shooter before police can get there, that's practical. That's safe.
Yeah.
You feel safer being protected by weapons when you're at a football game. You're at a Ravens game. There's one police officer armed for each 1,000 fans. That's a good ratio. So if you have a high school with 1,000 people, you have one armed person. That's not an army from the NRA. The NRA is being created to be a boogeyman because if you look at the statistics, the NRA doesn't donate that much money to politicians compared to other people. They donate less than unions.
Wow.
They donate less than Planned
Holy
Parenthood.
smokes.
They don't even crack the top 50 in terms of lobbying outfits. So, listen, I know the NRA is powerful in your mind, but a lot of the politicians that vote with the NRA aren't doing it because they're beholden, because they're getting a lot of donations. You can't buy a politician for $2,500. They vote with the Second Amendment because they believe in the Second Amendment.
I want to get CNN.
Well, I'm just going to bring up one other thing, which is the possible things that are changing. One of them has to do with something that's been sort of a thorn in the side of a lot of people for a long time, especially on the left, is that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, because of an amendment that was passed 25 years ago, has not been allowed and has not been funded to study gun violence and mental illness and gun violence. And all of those things get botched up. So one of the things we've talked about here is that it's better to make decisions based on evidence and facts and research so that you can be logical about it and actually try to solve the right problem. Well, there's been changes now. It looks like at least the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the new one, Alex Azar, looks like he's willing, he said in a hearing last week, to look at this issue, put some money towards it, and even the person, it's called the Dickey Amendment, former Congressman Dickey is actually thinking, I didn't mean for this to actually happen over 25 years. I'm okay with having some research done. So it might be a small thing, but if you are wanting to make decisions based on research,
Right.
then there might be a way forward
But
there.
Dana, do you know why that is? It's because of the power of the dollars from the NRA that has shut that down and made it a political issue.
No,
now
I know. I
can't
used to
even
answer
count.
questions about it all the time. But
Obviously not that powerful because they're
Right.
now open to doing it.
Well, I mean, 25 years. That's how difficult it is. Greg says, let's have real ideas and real conversations. I am so for it, but I think exactly the opposite of you. I think it's shut down by people who are fearful of the NRA.
What about?
What
I
have
mean,
you been
I
doing the
remember.
last 2
I mean,
days?
President. I remember somebody named President Obama, who had a Democratic Senate and Democratic Congress.
They had a 65-45 majority in the Senate. They voted on the
Right.
assault weapons ban. 16 Democrats voted against it.
Right.
9 are still in the Senate.
And I'm just saying, people are
Yeah.
fearful of having an honest
But
discussion.
that's also
here.
Democrats.
You say
right?
people when it's Democrats.
No. I think the Republicans
Notice
are
that?
totally in lock to the NRA, and some Democrats are fearful that if they say anything, they'll suffer at the ballot.
I think you guys create this in your head so you don't have to actually give practical solutions that
Right.
allow law-abiding gun owners to have their guns. So you create this big, like, we can't do anything, we're paralyzed.
No.
So you can't
all right.
actually listen to the practical solutions that have been laid before you.
Okay, well, more to come on the gun debate when the 5 returns.
Sorry about that.
You got to take the shot.
Welcome back. Tensions were high last night at a town hall in Florida. Marco Rubio bore the brunt of anger from students and parents fed up with inaction on gun control.
Senator Rubio, can you tell me right now that you will not accept a single donation from the NRA in the future?
So, number one, the positions I hold on these issues of the Second Amendment, I've held since the day I entered office in the city of West Miami as an elected official. Number two, no, the answer to the question is that people buy into my agenda. And I do support the Second Amendment. And I also support the right of you and everyone here to be able to go to school and be safe.
And then they directed their rage at NRA spokeswoman Dana Lash.
Do you believe that it should be harder to obtain the semi-automatic and weapons and the modifications for these weapons to make them fully automatic like bump stocks?
Do you know that it is not federally required for states to actually report people who are prohibited possessors, crazy people, people who are murderers? No? We've been actually talking about that for a long time. Let me answer the question. You can shout me down when I'm finished, but let me answer Emma's question.
Oh. I mean, that's a stark contrast, Juan, between the president's forum yesterday at the White House, which was filled with ideas and emotion and very polite and respectful.
Yeah.
And that was just really ugly, I thought.
I didn't think it was ugly. I thought it was quite direct. In other words, the president, was unusual. I think some here said they thought it was terrific to finally see that kind of discussion. We've seen it before with regard to immigration, but it was fun for people to get a look inside. The difficulty is that people say it's a dog and pony show. He's got his notes. Be sure to say, I hear you and all that. But I appreciate the idea that the president would take the time and make the effort. I don't care about the publicity. I just think that that was sincere, and I hope that it was sincere on his part. Although today when he says, oh, the NRA's patriots, I think, because the real meeting should be, what do you do when someone says, are you going to keep taking money from the NRA, Senator?
Well,
that's a hard discussion. What about you, Mr. President?
How much does Marco take?
You do have to give Marco credit for going into the belly of the beast, because that was a stacked deck there, Kimberly, by the sound of the crowd.
Because guess what? President Trump had the opportunity to go. There are other Republicans who just said no.
Okay. Kimberly?
Well, I mean, I try to focus on the positives. I think, when people show up and they go there and they try to have a civilized discourse, I mean, to me, it's like, you're not getting as much out of that CNN town hall because people are just very rude and very disrespectful, and I don't like that at all. I enjoyed the president's, 2 days of his meetings and listening sessions because I thought that you really had thoughtful discussion and deliberation and ideas that were, put forth, and I really enjoyed it. But when I see something like this, it just becomes almost like Roman theater. Or, is it going to feed him to the lions next? I'm just not sure what's happening there. Yes, I applaud Marco Rubio and Dana Lash for going because they want to actually be part of the solution. and they're not afraid to address people who have differing viewpoints. But you want to be able to hear them. Give them the opportunity to speak. Otherwise, it's just very, like, circusy.
And that was the difference, because there wasn't a lot of listening, it seemed like, last night. It reminded you of one of these college events where a conservative speaker gets up there and everybody just yells and drowns them out, and they don't hear the point of view.
I feel very strongly about the CNN town hall. I thought it was absolutely awful. The White House meeting was able to do what was necessary to combine emotional and rational solutions, emotional feeling and rational solutions. It was a conversation that leads to action. Then it was actually, I felt very hopeful after that. I felt like, my God, for the first time in my life about this issue, something's going to happen. And then CNN comes along and just poops all over that feeling. I'm sorry, but that was the best NRA fundraising letter you will ever see in your life, because you saw people wildly applaud for things that aren't going to happen. The way they treat what was an entire semi-automatic ban, the way they treated the guests who were there on good faith. CNN has a habit, it's a pattern of taking a contentious issue under the guise of concern and then inflaming it. And I remember this with the police shootings. Yeah. That they say, okay, this is a big problem, and it's this attention loop that they keep putting attention on it until the story actually does become the story that they want it to be, and then they do a story on that story, and so it never stops, and then they wonder why there's a Ferguson effect. Why did the cops pull back? Well, maybe they were demonized for 2 years. They're clouded by their confirmation bias, and I want to just end. They can't see how badly the circus was last night. The rest of America saw how bad that circus was. Jake Tapper is the best thing at CNN. He's just probably one of the most balanced, sharpest dudes there. I felt bad for him. I felt that he was not in the environment that he wanted. But that's my opinion.
Well, I think that one of the things that I think if the crowd had not been there, and if Jake Tapper had been allowed to maybe do more of the moderating and the directing of the discussion, you might not have had that mentality of the cheering. When we have presidential debates, remember Chris Wallace made sure everybody knew, like, don't clap, we don't want to hear anything, and when they, it's inevitable sometimes when you have an audience that happens. I think also that there's the White House setting. It immediately puts everybody on their best behavior because it is the #1 place in the world that you would want to be to have a discussion about freedom. Jonathan Tobin at National Review wrote a piece today that I think is really true. He said, the only thing government could do that would give activists what they crave is to repeal the Second Amendment. But Democrats are too politically savvy because they don't want to have that debate, because that would put them at odds with more than half of the country. But really, in order to achieve their goals, you would really have to repeal the Second Amendment.
And then they'd never win another election.
And so when you talk about these practical solutions, it will never be enough to satisfy everybody, but you might be able to get some things that will help in some places.
All right. Nancy Pelosi is still raging that you can now keep more of your hard-earned money. Next.
I know when something good has happened, the left implodes immediately afterwards. Take the tax bill, which has twisted Democrats into bitter pretzels. I mean, when you're saying the bill benefits the rich, then you call the millions of rebates crumbs, you look stupid. It's like noting that a chef is fat while he's cooking free meals at a shelter. So the tax bill must be awesome because the hits keep coming. The Dems actually want to repeal it, and I hope they try. In a recent town hall, Nancy Pelosi claims the bill was passed in the dead of night. A massive lie, even for her. In fact, we knew more about the tax bill than we know about her immense wealth. On the 5, we debated the damn thing for months. None of us loved it completely because we knew what was in it. Unlike Obamacare, a flaming mess dumped on America's porch at midnight. Then there's this.
If what you're doing is cutting the taxes at the high end and therefore not being allowed to invest in the future, you're doing a grave disservice to our country. Some patriots.
Yeah. So the bill's unpatriotic. How so? Are those millions of bonuses coming from corporations unpatriotic? I guess if it's not from Nancy's pen, then it's treason. Or is it the wage increases that came as a direct result of the cuts? Is that unpatriotic? I guess if it's not welfare, it must be evil. Fact is, to Pelosi, what's unpatriotic is any solution that her party, that hapless band of fools, didn't come up with. Whether it's immigration reform or tax cuts, it's just not right unless it's done by the left. And then, boy, does it suck. All right, we have to play this thought, which I just saw. This is Nancy Pelosi offering Democratic suggestions for border security. It involves a lawnmower.
Let's sit down and talk this through and see what makes sense, not some commitment to a promise that we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. That's never going to happen. But let's talk about where a more serious structure might be necessary, where fencing will do, or mowing the grass so that people can't be smuggled through the grass, and that's something about levees, technology, personnel.
I think this is the rallying cry, Jesse, for the Democratic Party. Mow that lawn. Mow that lawn.
The mow the lawn and the crumbs. I mean, it's just a whole host of unforced errors from Nancy. Listen, they've lost the tax debate, and their messaging has been atrocious. They've positioned themselves as being against people keeping more of their money. And you see it in the polls. Even Democrat support for the tax cuts doubled from 9% to 18%. The rest of the American public, when you put it all together, I think it's now over 50%. Juan the other day said something that I found very interesting about the popularity of the tax bill. He said he's surprised the tax cuts weren't at 90% popularity. And I'm very glad to hear you say that, Juan, that you would actually admit that 90% of the country wants to keep more of their money. Maybe the Democratic Party can listen to the American people and start cutting taxes too.
Juan, respond.
Immediately.
That almost rhymed.
If we have a poll on ice cream, apple pie, and grandmothers, what do you think the results should be? If it was 50%, you'd say, what the hell? How can 50% of America not like grandmothers, apple pie,
Some grandmothers are evil.
Yeah, maybe you only give them a little bit of ice cream. Maybe they will have more.
We have a tax cut that Mr. Trump says is the greatest thing ever, and it's only now approaching 50%. And according to the polls, it's only like a quarter of Americans who say they've seen any kind of bump in their pay.
So it's bad.
80%.
Oh, I see.
80%.
No,
More
25%. 25% say
wrong.
this. It's not wrong.
That's so wrong.
And then you think about it, you think about the realities that President Trump says something, and you guys play Nancy Pelosi because you love to beat up Nancy Pelosi.
Listen, they're her words.
She's
Yes,
a walking
we beat up
witch
Nancy
of the
Pelosi.
Democrats. Oh, my God. But Nancy Pelosi says something that makes total sense, which is the Mexicans aren't paying for this wall. He promised during the campaign, the Mexicans, now we're going to have to pay for it. And he's saying, oh, you know what, we have ways for you to force you Democrats to pay for it. Why don't Republicans say that's just crazy?
Dana?
Well, I remember something that Chris Tyrwell said a few weeks ago. I think it was on the Daily Briefing Show or the podcast, that the best thing that Nancy Pelosi could do for the Democrats in the midterms is wait until the 4th of July recess and retire, or announce she's not going to run again as Speaker, and let the new generation push it forward.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just very obvious at this point that, you know, the time has come and passed. What do the Republicans need to say? Just let Nancy Pelosi keep on talking, to be quite honest, because she's not making any sense. She says things that just are completely nonsensical, and the Republicans just sit there and go, at least we've come up with ideas, at least we're putting forward legislation, at least we want people to keep more of their money to reinvest into the market. So she's really like fighting kind of a losing cause and doesn't have any support or any good metaphors, analogies, or examples. Mow the grass.
Or it could be she's on grass.
Ooh.
No one uses that word anymore, right? That's like from Dragnet. We found some grass on him.
Yeah, Juan uses it.
I asked Jesse, hey, you got any grass?
The 5, up in smoke.
Yes.
Yes.
Grass. All right. CNN's hypocritical ambush of a Trump supporter when the 5 returns. Can't get enough of them.
She's my baby, she belongs to me, but yesterday she walked home on the road.
Hi.
Mueller indictments last week revealed some anti-Trump rallies in America were organized by the Russians. CNN and other news networks covered them wall-to-wall, unwittingly. So it's surprising to see one of their correspondents ambushing a Trump supporter for promoting an event organized on Facebook when she had no idea it was being staged by the Russians.
We were not Russians. I don't go with the Russians.
That
Come on,
group
give me a
was
break.
Russian.
I have nothing to do with the Russians. The
Well,
groups-
apparently you did.
No.
Maybe you didn't know it, but
Oh,
you
please.
did.
Those
what's
people
based on
that
the-
were with me were all Trump supporters. Very, very much so.
And
okay?
all apparently following the direction of groups that were associated with Russians who were actually
BS.
infiltrated.
BS. And please report that. I don't believe that. I know all the people that were with me, okay? They were at my meetings. They're all Trump supporters, okay?
Mm-hmm. But did you realize that you guys were in communication electronically with Russians?
Not me.
Just so nuts.
You know, this is interesting because to me, the Russians were organizing Black Lives Matter, the anti-Muslim, pro-Muslim. They were just trying to divide us. This woman obviously didn't realize that the Russians were the ones who were pushing her to get organized. CNN, though, I think might be guilty of a little browbeating here, Kimberly.
This is terrible. It's terrible. First the town hall, now this. Circus News Network. It's very bad. No, it's not going well. I don't like this. Why are you beating up on this lady? And it's like, I don't understand. This isn't, investigative journalism. It's bizarre. I don't even understand what they're trying to accomplish here. And this poor lady, God help them. She's got quite a lawsuit. If anything happens to her, now she's being threatened and targeted online. Something happens to her, her family, like we saw with Steve Scalise. I can't even imagine. What is the point of this?
Jesse, but she didn't seem to acknowledge that, in fact, she was talking with the Russians.
Because I don't even think she realized she was talking with the Russians.
Obviously.
I've done this dozens and dozens of times and ambushed people. I've never done it to a regular person at the side of their house. I don't understand. Listen, the guy can go to someone's house with a camera and a mic. That's fine. But his tone was so wrong and accusatory and so off. She's an elderly woman who got caught up unwittingly in some sort of, Facebook page situation with a Russian. These were small rallies with a dozen people. She was liking a Facebook page thing. This is much worse than what CNN was doing, who for 4 hours broadcast a Russian-sponsored event and made it seem like it was a love rally. And this is the second time they did this. Remember they outed the guy that made a GIF of President Trump body slamming the CNN logo? They blew that guy up, too, and then he was getting death threats.
And you have a situation, Dana, now where people are saying, well, they're unfair to this Trump supporter.
Well, here's the thing. The Russians understand us sometimes better than we understand ourselves. We're starting to catch up on that now. We all self-select. We reinforce online. The Russians were able to exploit that, whether it was for Bernie Sanders supporters or Black Lives Matter or for Trump supporters. Basically, they would figure out a way to just throw a little chum in the water, and they knew that those people would go to them. They were figuring it out. The trolls were coming after us, too. I didn't know that they were trolls. I thought that they were my fellow Americans being total jerks. You
can't read it.
And it was, and also that they couldn't spell or that they have terrible grammar. And once I realized that they were just Russians, I don't even bother with it anymore.
I told you
and
guys
it would
not
be
to
very
read
brave of CNN to actually, or anyone. Let's see a correspondent ambush a Russian. Let's go to St. Petersburg to that troll factory. Let's have somebody ask Putin about it. In a way that is actually more aggressive than it has been so far.
We'll do it on the weekend so I don't miss the 5.
But Greg, when President Trump confronted Vladimir Putin, he said, no, nothing to do with...
I know you're trying really hard not to make this story about what the story is, but the story is, bottom line, what CNN did. This is the result of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
They see nothing but what they want to see. They went to an average person's home. They should actually turn this into a TV show where they actually, every day, they should go to a person who represents something they don't like. Maybe they should go to a classroom and tell all the kids the truth about Santa Claus, right? Because that's the truth, right? Or maybe send, Neil deGrasse Tyson to some old lady's house to tell her that hopes and prayers, they don't really work because you're so much smarter than the average person. They should do an ambush of their own producers.
Yeah.
They should go to the producer's house and go, hey, boy, you were really stupid when you fell for that damn rally. It gets me so mad. This act did more to affect the 2018 midterms than the Russians could ever hope for. Because when you look at that, you can never trust those people again.
It's probably the first time CNN talked to a Trump supporter.
I don't think that's the
Kaylee's.
case. Or grievance and resentment.
I hope the Nation's Hall Monitor, Brian Stelter, will cover this. Nation's Hall Monitor.
Okay. Ahead, another miracle on ice. The U.S. women's hockey team striking gold in South Korea.
Finally struck hockey gold, breaking arch rival Canada's 16-year grip as Olympic champions with a final score of 3-2. And what a game. A sudden death shootout thriller in overtime, the first in Olympic women's hockey history. Juan, big day for the U.S.
A great day. I must say, our neighbors did not behave well. They wouldn't wear their silver medals. They were so upset. Ooh. But I just wanted to point out how the U.S. women's hockey players had to fight the U.S. government themselves, the Olympic Committee, in order to get equal pay.
That's right.
The same kind of travel, the same kind of disability rights. So big victories this year for women's hockey.
Big victory. What do you think about the sore loser? There was one Canadian. They put the medal on her, and then she immediately took it off.
Terrible.
I understand because they dominate hockey, and it's 16 years. You know what? So I'm not going to pile on. You know, she's upset, but she's a poor sport.
I gave you an opening right there to pile on. You want to pile on?
I'm against all this. I think every team should get a medal. Every team. And they should all be one uniform level. They should all get gold medals. This is a disgusting display.
Kimberly, say it this segment.
Yes, I will do it right now. Win with dignity and accept a loss as well with dignity and grace. So I think it's unsportsmanlike, even though I'm unfamiliar with
Sportswomanlike.
Come on,
Sportswomanlike.
Anyway, congratulations to the women's hockey team from all of us here at the 5. One more thing is up next.
Humorous.
Okay. All right, well, it's time now for one more thing. Kimberly, why don't you start it off and do it really well? Okay, great. It's time for Kimberly's Royal News.
No.
All right, just do it.
Oh, Bill Gates!
He's our royalty.
Fine. I had the royal one first. Okay, so this is actually very cute. It's a great video, and it's Microsoft founder Bill Gates. He's not royalty, and he also doesn't shop. So take a look at this. It's quite funny. He doesn't know the prices of anything.
Oh, that was funny. I did see this.
Totino's Pizza Rolls. One bag of Totina Pizza Rolls.
I'll go with 22. No, 15.
Lower.
8.
All right, let's try it. $8. $8.99.
I didn't think it was fun.
Yeah, so all of us were going to get those wrong. It's not that easy to do the pricing. It also depends on where you live and where you're shopping, or if you buy in bulk. Okay, we have to go. Sorry.
That was way off.
Good, Dana.
But we don't have to go yet because I have one more thing. All right, Luke Fox of Westchester, Pennsylvania, was thrilled when he got a notice for jury duty. The problem is he's only 11. His mom said she couldn't request an exemption online because there's no one labeled too young to serve. He was a little bummed out because he actually was very excited to serve on a jury and sounds very qualified. He's a Boy Scout. He has organized a community food drive. Does all sorts of great things, and this is what he said about what a good juror should possess. Watch.
Problem solving and being unbiased.
I think Kimberly would have chosen him for a jury.
I love him. I went like this. I was like, oh my God, he'd be a great 4-person. All right. Can you say 4-person?
Good job, Luke Fox. Just 7 more years and you'll be on a jury.
Oh, yeah. Go, Greg.
All right. Fox News Podcasts.com. You'll find my latest podcast with Rob Long. He's a producer and writer for Cheers. And now Kevin Can Wait. This is one of my favorite podcasts because it's about how to write for television. And it's very honest and frank. It's at go to FoxNewsPodcast.com. Now it's time for...
Oh, my God. Why does he get 2 one more thing?
Greg's Andrew WK News. All right. Andrew WK, do you know who he is? I think we have video of him. Throw some video real quick.
History Museum in Washington. When you go to see a friend's play, you're never sure what to expect. In this case, it was terrific, well beyond my expectation. The play, written by my pal Chris Wilson, tells the story of the 1961 debate between Malcolm X and Bayard Rustin, the militant black separatists. Take a look.
I don't think you know where you're going to go, and
I don't think you do. We do. We can take some land right here, sir. How? Right here. It belongs to us. Yeah, but if you argue that these people are not going to permit you to integrate... We are not going to integrate.
Hats off to Chris. He's ready to take the play to the next stage. He's got a hit on his hands.
Jesse, fast, no.
Okay, new study that shows drinking alcohol is the key to living past 90.
Yes,
Two
excellent.
drinks a day,
That's all we have
Greg.
time for. Special report is
I'm going to live to 270.
Hey, Brett, get your hand out of my shot. Hi.